material to talk about in this webinar today. I kind of bit off a little more than I could chew when I put the materials together. We try to keep these webinars to 45 minutes because I know how I get when I'm watching a webinar. If it goes beyond 45, I tend to zone out just a little bit. I want to cover as much as we possibly can. We'll see how it goes. If we have need, we can definitely dive in a little deeper in another webinar and talk about these subjects. But special events are awesome. They are one of the things that make working for a local government really nice, really cool, where we can provide some great service to our community. These events have a tendency to unify our community. We provide entertainment that doesn't happen the rest of the, maybe it may not happen the rest of the year. We provide some great service, and it's also a real positive thing for our perception as an organization. Doesn't matter if we're a city, a county, some of the districts do events like these as well. They're a great thing to unify our community. However, they can also be a disaster. Now, I'm not sure if whether these videos are going to come through or not. So if you can see it, if there's a couple of you out there, if you can see this, go ahead and type in the chat box and let me know. So what we're watching is there's a video of a fireworks event that goes wrong. It looks like a 4th of July, and those fireworks, a firework shoots off into the crowd, and you hear the gasp from the people. Oh no! Oh no! And you can't see it. Thank you so much for letting me know that you can see that. What a terrible thing to have an event like this go sorely wrong, and unfortunately we've seen that a number of times in the state. In general, things go as we plan. But if we fail to plan, then we definitely can run into some real problems. How do we handle it if something does go wrong? Do we have that in our plans? And that's really what this webinar is all about. It's a giant subject, and I welcome your questions. Doug, Brent, and myself, as well as the rest of the team here, are wide open to any questions you have. Please ask your questions through the webinar, but if you'd like to discuss specific scenarios and that and things like that, please contact us. Debbie says, so if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. I think that's absolutely right, and unfortunately we've seen a few of those, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those details. But how do we manage the risk around these events? How do we avoid pain? We don't want to. We want to see kids or participants in our events get injured. We certainly don't want to get sued. We don't want to have our organizations have negative press and all the bad things that go around with an event failure. So how do we avoid those things? That's the subject of this webinar today. We have to lay some groundwork to start with. How do we become liable? How do we open ourselves up to liability? And then how do we protect ourselves from that? We'll talk about how to plan great events, throw out some best practices and some examples as we go along. Once again, I'm going to cruise through this material really fast. If I don't cover something adequately, please ask a question and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. But we do have a lot of material, so I am going to move quite quickly. So what is liability? It's being responsible for something. So in a legal sense of things, we need to owe a duty to somebody. That means we need to have a legal responsibility to this person. If I have a home or a business, I have a responsibility to clear that sidewalk when the snow and ice comes. We've just had some big storms come around the state in the last couple of weeks. If I fail to remove that snow and ice, and the letter carrier, the UPS delivery person comes to my house, and they slip and fall on my steps or on my sidewalk, I could own some liability for that. That's why our homeowners coverage has some medical coverage there. That's not for us, that's for people coming to our house. Same thing goes for our facilities. If we owe a duty to somebody and we breach that duty, I don't clear the ice, and that person falls, and that's the proximal cause of their injury is that ice that I didn't clear for the last 3 weeks, then they can bring a suit against me. Will they prevail? Maybe, maybe not. One thing to think about is we can be sued for anything. Do we lose? That's really the deciding part of that is up to us. How well we prepare and how well we're able to defend ourselves determines whether we're going to have to pay anything else out. So you guys have heard this from me before. This is a little phrase that I coined. If you build it, they will sue. So really, if we have facilities, which most of our organizations have some great facilities, it might be parks, fairgrounds, places like that where these activities take place, we are open to suit. Whether they can prevail against us is really up to the details and what we've done to avoid that. So let's talk about a duty. This is a legal obligation that we incur by owning property, by providing a service, by providing a product. By doing that, we take a certain amount of duty upon ourselves. So who do we owe that duty to? People we invite to come to our facilities. If we throw a park up and we put out a playground, we have invited people to come and enjoy that facility. With that comes the duty to ensure that playground is in a safe condition, and we haven't allowed conditions to exist or equipment that doesn't meet standards. And if somebody gets injured and we have allowed that, then they can bring suit against us and have a good potential to win. We also have two other groups, licensees. Those are people that pay us to use our facilities. We have a greater duty to people who pay us to visit our facilities, to take part in our events, than just the average person. And we also have trespassers. Do we owe a duty to trespassers? The reality is, if they are a minor, 14 or under, we owe a great duty to them. We can't leave an attractive nuisance out there, a pile of concrete with rebar sticking out of it, or something that might be attractive to children that could also be a hazard and cause them injury. Other trespassers, we owe them less of a duty, but we might have to, but we can't go out and set a trap and say, okay, you're going to come steal from me, I'm going to set a bear trap out there. We can't do that. If we did that, we would probably owe that person, even if they came in to steal from us, we would owe them for their medical, for the injuries that were sustained from that bear trap that we left out there. Okay. So what's the standard of care? If I have a truck and a mattress and I'm going to haul that mattress from one place to another, the standard of care is I need to I need to tie that mattress down. If I don't tie that mattress down and it flies off of my truck and causes a wreck, well, I probably own some liability for that. Okay, so what's the standard of care? We need to evaluate our facilities and identify what is it. It might be something as simple as when it snows or when there's ice, I need to go and clear that and put down some ice melt. It may be something different. There are legal precedents that let us know what our duties are, but there are also things called like consensus standards. It might be an ASTM standard that tells us what our playground equipment what standards it should meet. There might be manufacturer's requirements. At the end of the day, what's in that owner's manual is very important when it comes to a court case. So if we have a piece of equipment and we haven't followed the manufacturer's recommendations or requirements, that's a lot harder to defend that claim. So Don't throw away that owner's manual. Keep a file on each of those pieces of equipment and be prepared to answer for the questions that surely will come if somebody's injured on the equipment. All right, some of you might say, hey, you can't sue the government though. We have immunity. We're protected from those things. The reality is our immunity is being eroded away year after year. There might be a court case lost in one place or another, and little by little our immunity is waived. We have certain protections, limits, but depending on the circumstances of the incident that happens, if somebody's constitutional, their First Amendment rights or their any of their rights under the Constitution are infringed, we may be responsible for a much higher award than our normal governmental immunity protections will allow us. Okay, so here's a couple of things, a couple of concepts to think about when we're talking events. Inherent risks. The state has the state legislature has defined certain activities as being inherently dangerous. We understand that if you're participating in rodeo events or skateboarding or skydiving or paragliding or some of these other inherently dangerous sports or activities, there's a good likelihood that you're going to be hurt. Well, the legislature has issued immunity laws that protect us from having suits against us for participating in these activities. Okay, that's great. It defines counties, municipalities, or local districts on each one of those. Okay, so what's an inherent risk? It's an integral and natural part of participating in a recreational activity. And here's a list of some of those activities that are inherently risky. Fishing is inherently risky. Brent, you better be careful when you're out there next time. All right, so let's talk about immunity. How do we, are we protected by immunity? The answer is yes. It says each governmental entity and each employee of a governmental entity are immune from suit for any injury that results from the exercise of a governmental function. Hey, great, we don't have to worry about it. Why do we even have insurance? Well, the reality is that's not the case. In many cases we can defend that, but not always. Governmental immunity is waived when the injury that happens is caused by a defective, unsafe, or dangerous condition of public improvement, or the injury is proximately caused by a negligent act or omission of an employee committed within the scope of employment. So if we have an unsafe condition, if our employees or us do an unsafe act or we omit to do something we're supposed to be, then we can go past that. So I'm hoping everybody can see the video here. If somebody participates in rodeo, that's an inherently dangerous activity. If they get bucked off of the horse and it kicks them in the head, that's on them. They decided to participate in that activity. However, as we watch in this video, somebody gets hung up on a horse and they're getting drug around the arena. If we have left a bolt sticking out of the fencing along the side of there, or if we have a big rock out in the middle of the arena and the person is, they're either impaled on the bolt or they smack their head on the rock, we are bringing liability on ourselves by that. It's not just rodeo anymore when there is a dangerous condition. Okay, so as we look at our events, that's what we have to identify: dangerous conditions and activities that could cause us that could open us up to liability. All right. So what we have to do is we have to prove that we have to be reasonable and prudent and be able to prove that we've been reasonable and prudent. What is the right thing to do? If it snows, we clear the snow and we put down ice melt, and we document it when we're done. Okay? So how do we avoid liability? Uh-oh, I had some things come in here. Here's some different strategies that we can use, and we'll go through each of those briefly. Generally, we practice, though, what we call risk limitation, and it's some combination of each of these strategies where we own some liability, but we do something about it. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. This is called risk avoidance. Some of you just got creeped out just a little bit, right, by the clown. Risk avoidance. If we say, you know what, we're not going to sponsor any events or do anything like that, we don't have liability. Short as that. Well, that's no fun, but it is a decision that we can make. So if we don't do the activity, then we avoid that risk. That's one strategy that we can use. Next one is risk retention, and that's, you know what, we own this. This is our event. We're taking responsibility for everything that happens there. We don't have to make this decision. If we don't make the decision, if we don't make any decision to use one of these strategies, we own it. We own the risk. And if we go out and we throw that harrow up and lean it up against the fence, we own the consequences of that happening. If a kid climbs up on it and tips over on them and they're injured, we own those things. So risk retention is part of our quiver of tools that we can use. But this is the last one that we want to have. We want to avoid that liability if we can. Okay, risk transference. This is kind of a big subject. We ask ourselves, who owns the event? A lot of times I'll get a question from people, hey, you know, we've got this event going on, and after we discuss for a little while, it becomes clear that this event is not our members' event. It is some other group that's coming in, running this event in our facilities, and expecting us to pay the bills if something goes wrong. Sometimes they're kind of a loose grassroots group. Sometimes they're an organized group. We see these issues with sports clubs and other organizations that don't have any coverage, and they advertise it under our organization names, the city or the county or the district, and they're providing us with liability without giving us control over the event. So we need to identify those situations and make a change. We want to transfer the event. So ask yourself, whose event is this? Do we have the ability to control what happens? If not, let's shed that risk. Let's have that organization take the risk. So let's let that organization own it. So they're contractors, maybe event promoters. You might have the demolition derby. Do we want the risk from a demolition derby? I know from my standpoint as a risk manager, heck no, we don't want to take that on ourselves. So how can we avoid that risk? Well, let's let somebody else, maybe a promoter, a group comes in. They might take more of the proceeds from that, but if we structure it correctly, then we can avoid much of the risk. Okay, so how do we avoid that risk? Well, we have to set up contracts with them that specify who owns the risk. So we'll have an agreement, an indemnification agreement with specific language that lets the contractor, lets the promoter, whatever that person is, that obligates them to own the risk and releases our organization from the risk. Another essential part of this is to secure a certificate of insurance from that group that's coming in, naming our organization as an additional insured. And that basically says that organization releases this. Hey, if anything bad happens, it's all on us. Your organization is not responsible, and we'll take care of it. All right. I just saw a question. We're holding an event in a state park, and they're requiring us to have a $3 million policy just for this one event. Does the trust issue this, or do we go to another agency? Yeah. So depending, there are some specifics. You know, if it's something that is specifically excluded from your policy, then there might be some additional coverage that we can secure for you. But if it's not an excluded thing, it's part of your normal operations, then your general liability coverage should cover that. Now, definitely, we want to go through the specifics, and I would recommend that you talk to your account executive here at the trust to ensure that coverage is adequate for what you're doing. But in general, that will happen, and we get those requests all the time. You know, a situation like this, we're doing an event at a state park. The state says we want coverage, and so you call us up and say we want a certificate of insurance that proves that we have $3 million or whatever the number is, and lists this other organization, the state, as the additional insured. Let's see, Hurricane City's rep, that would be Josh. Josh McKell covers Washington County. I'll answer another question here. Can we obtain a certificate of insurance for an event hosted by us using a third-party contractor and held on private property? It would be the same situation where you would secure that certificate of insurance from the contractor's carrier. We want to verify that they have adequate coverage and that we have been indemnified. Okay. All right. I know there will be a lot of questions on that. Let's maybe think about those questions. I'll dive into this just a little bit because anticipating some of these questions, we threw this on there. What type of contract language will need to be in there? I will send that out today. We have some suggested language. Once again, you should always talk with your attorney and just verify the specifics based on the type of event that's happening. This is general, but we always want to run that past our attorney to make sure it's okay. But I've got standard language that we will email out today. What about limits? So as we're looking, how much does this contractor or promoter need to have? It really depends. At a base level, we look at how do we protect ourselves. Well, we have these governmental immunity levels, and this is a number that actually changes based on inflation. It goes up pretty much every year, and as of right now, I believe it's $2.41 million is a statutory limit for losses that we can put out. Now, is that always going to be the case? No, we talked about that you can. If you have a constitutional claim, something like that, it can pierce those limits. But in general, this is what we're looking at: is how do we protect ourselves up to the point where we can have to pay out. So that's the reason why when you ask about, hey, the state's looking for $3 million in coverage, that's the reason why. Is they've looked at their statutory limits, and that will actually be going up. Probably, I heard a rumor that it would be going up to about 2.7 million. So that's a big jump, and so that's really a reason for doing that. We want to look at that coverage. Is it on an occurrence basis? Is there an aggregate limit? Generally, the minimum we want to see is a $1 million or a $2 million limit and $1 million per occurrence, and so we have adequate coverage there. And then beyond that, we want to increase those limits based on the risk. So if we're having the demolition derby, this contractor or event promoters coming in, and they're doing a demolition derby. We've had 2 fatalities in the last couple of years associated with demolition derbies. They're risky events, so we probably want to increase that coverage. And so if you have questions, let's see. Just got a permit for St. George, and their coverage is in the 10 million occurrence and 20 million aggregate. I'm not exactly sure the permit. Is it a request for that? We want to look at our own organizations. Oh, it's a race. Yeah, and depending on what it is. So if we've got a large risky event, then that coverage is going to go up. You want to look at your own organization and say, how much risk do we have? Sit down with our account executives and say, what's a reasonable coverage for us? And that's a discussion that you should have each year prior to your renewal. So you have a plan. You know, I think we've expanded to a point where we need to increase those limits. Talk to your account executive on that. All right. We want to be named as an additional insured. That means that we're being listed on that contractor or promoter's insurance to protect them. All right. Brent's in there going, yeah, you said you're going to do about 30 seconds per slide. It's not happening there. Additional coverage. Sometimes these contractors or others have a difficult time securing insurance, or it's maybe a kind of a loose group that comes together. You know, the family reunion, you know, we've got a big family reunion that's coming in and renting out our park. Can we, how does a family like that get coverage? There's a couple of different ways that we look at this and other coverages that you can get. TULIP coverage, that's the tenant user liability insurance policy. That's for people who are using our facilities. So let's say this family reunion, big group comes in and they're going to use our facilities. This is a way that they can get coverage. I've got the website on there. I will send out in the email I send later. It's actually a step-by-step way that you can help them out. All this is they you can provide them this website and they can look at it. Many people can secure coverage through their normal agent and sometimes through their homeowner's policy. They can get an umbrella coverage that will cover what you require. Okay, let's take the second group. These are not people that are coming in and renting our facilities or using our facilities. These are people like vendors. Say we have a festival, and there are food vendors that want to come in and sell gyros. Gyros sound good right now, or brats, or something like that. At our events, that's a common thing that we do. Actually, it's I put this picture on here on purpose. Pickle on a stick. I've never seen that. If they want to come in and sell pickle on a stick at our events, what happens if they have some sort of foodborne illness and a whole bunch of people get sick? They're kind of a small organization, and they don't have a whole lot of money, so if somebody decides to sue, they're going to name everybody involved. Well, we need to protect ourselves from possibilities like that. For that, there's another organization that we found. We don't have any ties with them. We don't get anything out of this if they do get coverage with this organization. We just found that they are they're very reasonable in their rates, and so we throw it out there. It's fastcov.com, fast coverage, and so you know, you might have a 2-day event or a 1-day event. This group can provide coverage for those vendors. So Pickle on a Stick comes in and they spend $50 or $100 or something like that. Those are just numbers I'm throwing out, but our experiences, they've been very, very reasonable. They can purchase coverage specifically for that event and specifically for the types of services or products that they're providing. And if you have more questions about that, I'm throwing a whole bunch on the account executives today because I'm not the coverage guy, I'm the risk manager, but this is an important part of it. If you have coverage questions, talk to your account executive. If you have questions about who your account executive is, we can definitely answer those questions for you. I threw in just a couple of things, worries that I have. We've discovered a number of things recently. There are some rodeos out there we've discovered where we've got a local rancher providing the stock for a rodeo. Why does that make me twitch just a little bit? I don't think the rancher probably has coverage for that type of exposure. They may not. So that's just one to bring up. Think about if you're providing a rodeo, let's hire a professional stock company. You know, if we bring in the Brahma bull that the local rancher has out there, we don't know how that's going to fare, or if there's a problem if we've got coverage to protect us. So look at all of those contractors. We shouldn't be in the business of providing stock unless that's the business that we're doing. Other things, what are people doing in our facilities? We need to be aware of what's going on. We may have a park that we rent out a Bowery or a pavilion. I have to say both ways, depending on what part of the state you live in. What are people doing there if people rent our facilities? So let's keep track of those things. Let's ask questions because we see some crazy stuff happening now. Set limits on what people can do in our rental agreements. We should limit people to what people normally do in parks. Let's see. I had a couple of questions. Let's see. Small town. Disease vectors. Yeah, absolutely. What if we bring in stock? That's a great point, Debbie. What if we bring in stock just from the local area and they happen to have a disease and it kills the other stock horses that people bring in for the rodeo contract that and they die? Could we be on the hook for that? I don't know. Maybe. So, all right. Be aware of other things that happen in our facilities, in our parks, things like slacklining and parkour, where people are jumping off of rocks and roofs and that. Ask questions about that. Have your contract set up. I have a big selection of contracts. It doesn't really work to send that out. If you're interested in these, let me know, and I can send you out a wide variety of those contracts. We've just collected those from our members over the years, some good ones. Some of them are very detailed, some of them are a little easier. Told you I had a lot of stuff to talk about today. So, we can put together great events in Utah. The Olympics are a great example of that, and I'm particularly proud of that, having been involved with risk management for the games. We put a lot of work into that, and many of you out there volunteered and helped out in one way or another with the Olympics, and we pulled off a massive, great event. Can we do that at our facilities? Maybe not at the scope of the Olympics. However, we can do it if we plan and prepare. So how do we do that? Number one, let's start early. Probably the day after our event ends is the day we should start planning for the next year. We scheduled this webinar we said, you know what, 1st of February, that'll give us a little bit of time if people haven't already prepared. But let's plan and prepare. You need to let us know what you're up to. So each year, as you fill out your liability application, we ask you a whole bunch of stuff, and I know it's a pain to fill this out, but it's important. So on the last page of your liability application, it asks about special events. Does your agency host or support any special events? For example, rodeos, concerts, carnivals, fairs, etc. And then from there, we ask you a bunch of questions about that. And we want you to tell us, we want you to list the events. So in that first section, you can see there are 5 different events. If you got more, you can add another page to cover all of those events. And then where those questions are, put the number of the event that corresponds to that. So we'll look at the second one. Will more than 500 people attend the event? That's the statutory number for a mass gathering. If we've got over 500 people at event number 1, 3, and 4, put those numbers on that line. So then that gives us an idea of the risk that we're taking on, and if you need any backup. There are some other questions. Will liquor be served? So liquor, alcohol is one of those things that's excluded from policy coverage. unless we have have information on that. We can secure that coverage. Other things, fireworks, want to know about those. Inflatables, and inflatables meaning bounce houses or trampolines or other rebound devices. Those are things that are specifically excluded from coverage. And so we ask about that, so then we can have contact with you and secure the coverage that you need for those that are outside of that. Okay, let's talk planning really quick. Let's see. Oh yeah, so the question we have, do we have opinion on inflatable slides and jump houses? Yeah, I'm going to dive into that in just a minute and talk about that. As we start planning our events, bad things happen when we're sitting in a meeting and somebody says, oh, you know what would be awesome? I've been watching YouTube videos and we can go out and we can do this. We're going to have flaming bicycle race or something, some crazy thing like that. And we see a lot of strange events that are proposed. That's the point where we should really sit back and ask ourselves, is this appropriate? There are some things that local governments just shouldn't do, and we should say, is this acceptable risk for us? Sometimes these things are specifically excluded from your liability coverage. We don't want to take on an event like that because then you're flying solo. Okay, so if you have a question about that, then you'll call your account executive and say, hey, what about this? If we have, we want to do this, we want to have somebody bring in, we've got a guy in the neighborhood and he's got a paraglider and he's going to fly over the soccer field and throw out candy for all of the kids. Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Well, those things can go bad, and in this given situation here, it went bad. And had this paraglider crash into a field full of children and adults as well, resulting in multiple injuries. Okay, so we look at these situations and say, is this okay? Is it crazy? Is this a dumb thing? What if we did wingsuits? We can get a bunch of kids and throw them off of cliffs in wingsuits. Well, that's just kind of crazy, right? We're way outside of what's reasonable, but let's sit back and ask ourselves a question. Is this really crazy? There are certain things that we just shouldn't do as a local government. Let's let those private agencies that want to go out there, or private companies, and take that giant risk, and along with that, take the big rewards from providing the bungee jumping or the wingsuit activities. Those are probably outside of what we ought to be doing. Let's see. Yeah, so another question on bounce houses. Just a minute, we're almost there. So we asked, is it covered? Certain things are excluded. Aircraft, for one. So if you're bringing an airplane to throw the candy out on the soccer field, that's excluded. Part of the reason why we're doing this webinar is I found a couple of events this last summer in my neighborhood that were doing this type of event. We are, pardon the pun, flying solo on those because aircraft is excluded from your liability policy. If you want to do an activity like that, we can secure coverage for that, but it's additional outside of your general liability. Why do we have exclusions in our policy? It's really to protect the entire pool, so we don't have some of these crazy high-risk things happening that exposes the entire membership of the trust to bigger risk. Okay. Other things, rebound devices. What's that? That's bounce houses and also trampolines. And I imagine bungee cords would be involved in rebound devices as well. Mechanical amusement rides. These are all specifically excluded from the policy. However, we can get coverage for that. What's my opinion on bounce houses? They're risky. Let's watch I'll forget this one. We'll go to the next slide in a second. I got to hit this one before I forget. Lots of stuff in this. Additional lines of coverage, things like event cancellation. So say you're bringing in a concert that has a big name, and it's an outdoor concert. What happens if we have a thunderstorm that comes in, or there's a problem with the venue, or there's a problem with the performer, and we cancel, and we're on the hook for all these tickets that we've sold and all the preparations there. How do we cover that? We can provide event cancellation coverage as well, but you have to secure that prior to the event. So if you find yourself in that category, talk to your account executive again, and we can get that. All right, back to the bounce houses and rebound devices. Here's this video. Hopefully everybody can see the videos. Bounce houses are a blast, right? You think, oh, that's no big deal. It's not like an amusement park ride. It's not necessarily the activity involved in the bounce houses, although kids get hurt on bounce houses. It's the structures themselves. As you can see in these videos, if they are not anchored properly, and sometimes even if they are, they can take off and blow away. And we have multiple videos, pictures, and stories of kids actually being seriously injured from the bounce house tipping over on them. I have one story where the bounce house, gust of wind picked it up and had two children inside of the bounce house, and the kids fell out at about 50 feet elevation prior to the bounce house taking off, and it flew hundreds of feet into the air. That's why we get very nervous about bounce houses. That's why we've excluded that from the coverage, and you have to go out and get additional coverage. That's beyond what the average organization does. So do we say under no circumstances do bounce houses? No, I think that's fine. One of the best ways to do this is to have a contractor come in and provide this. And as they do that, like we talked, they bring with them an insurance policy, and they list you as an additional insured. So this is a great way to do it. Have the contractor come in and provide it. It's their risk and their benefit as well if they're selling rides there. Let's see. Great question. Should we disallow bounce houses from park and facility rentals? That's a great question. It is. It's your decision to make. If you decide to allow those as part of your, somebody comes out and rents your park, and you want to allow those, then you need to require coverage, sufficient coverage, as well as providing you with a certificate of insurance that lists your organization as an additional insured on their policies. Now, sometimes, you'll have a family, and they own one of these things. My sister owns a bounce house. She started talking to me about it, like, you bought a what? And we've got a family, and they want to come in and have a party and bring in their bounce house. This is a real easy way to see how serious they are about it. Say, well, you have to provide as proof of coverage that a certificate of insurance that lists the city or whatever your organization is as an additional insured. And if they're serious about it, they'll provide you coverage. Any contractor that's worth their salt will have coverage. Will be able to provide that coverage. If they don't, I wouldn't deal with a contractor like that. It is you're flying blind there and wide open on that. So let's get them to take the risk. All right, I've got a few, let's see, questions. Is there any obligation to inspect the bounce house contractor's equipment for safety issues? Obligation to do that? I would probably do it at the contract level, and definitely talk to your attorney about this. I didn't give that disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I'm a risk manager. So that's the angle I come from. So if it's a legal question, ask your attorney on that. I would not take the obligation on myself to inspect their to inspect their equipment. I would place that in the contract that they will have safe equipment. The language should be in there requiring them to provide safe equipment, and that it puts the responsibility on them. However, if you see an issue out there, should we take action? And my answer on that is yes. So if we see that bounce house is out there and it is not secured to the ground, or there's an obvious safety issue there, I would take action there. I would bring it to their attention. If they don't take action, I would have that in your contract that if they do not abide by the agreement that you have, that they provide safe facilities, that you can rescind that contract or stop them from doing that activity. You know, once again, talk to your attorney about the specific language of that and how you go about that. Question about floats. I'll get to that in just a second. All right. Next question we ask is, can you do it? Can we realistically do this? Is this, I'll see some really small organizations taking on some very big events, stuff that is probably beyond their capabilities. So let's have a realistic conversation there. Is this something that we can do? Is this something that we should do? Next question, can we legally do it? There are legal requirements to do certain things like setting off fireworks, mass gatherings. If we have more than 500 people get together in a place that's not normally designed for that, not a big auditorium that's designed to bring people in, then we're responsible to secure a mass gathering permit and provide all of the requirements for that. So let's talk fireworks really quickly. Do you use a contractor, or do you have your employees set off those fireworks? If we have a contractor do that, we do the same thing that we talked before. We have a written contract spelling out who's liable for what, indemnifying your organization for what the contractor does, and have them provide a certificate of insurance naming you as additional insured, verify limits and all of those things. If we are doing fireworks on our own and having the fire department, somebody like that, set those fireworks off, this is something that is there's a legal requirement that anybody doing that needs to be a certified shooter. They need to attend a course with the State Fire Marshal's office, and they need to have experience doing shows with a certified shooter. If we go outside of that, that might bring more liability upon ourselves if we haven't done those required things. So there's a legal requirement for that. Mass gatherings, like we said, if we've got over 500 attendees, there are a ton of requirements for this, and I've already exceeded my 45 minutes. Sorry, folks. There are a ton of requirements. I put the state law. This is R392-400, and there's a big list. Some of those things are providing proper sanitation, depending on the time that they're there, the number of people. We have to provide a different number of porta potties. We have to provide first aid. That first aid is very specific in what we have to have. That pretty much requires us to have an ambulance on site or a very, very well-stocked first aid area. We can't just have a first aid kit. We also have to have people who can provide that first aid. Okay, so look at that state law. If you've got questions, talk to me about it. Oh, one thing that I didn't talk about. The state law requires us to have these permits and specifies exactly what we have to do for mass gatherings. Our local health department is the organization that will enforce those regulations and provide the mass gathering permits. So, and that may vary from place to place. If you've got something different, let me know on that. Risky events. So once again, think what is adequate coverage. And let's see, on that adequate coverage, we've got a question here. How much liability coverage should we require to the require of the bounce houses? That is a good question. I did not ask our coverage guys on that specifically. I would probably be looking at that as one of those riskier activities. Don't quote me on this, but I would be looking at probably a $5 million aggregate policy on that. I'll ask the coverage guys on that what their recommendation is. We want to put together a plan, a safety plan to prepare us for that, prepare us for what's going on. Safety should be a part of our overall goal in pulling off this event. Somebody talked about, I thought I'd turn the audio off on this. Somebody talked about parades. People love parades. They're one of those fun things that we do as part of our events. But they can go very wrong. Paul asked about, what about throwing candy from the floats? We don't recommend this. As a matter of fact, I'd say don't do it. Reason being, kids don't make good decisions. They have poor skills in judging timing, distance, height, and all of those things, and they may think they can get that piece of candy and run out underneath the fire engine tires. So throwing candy from the floats is something that we should really avoid. How can, that's a fun thing. How can we still provide that experience? Maybe we have walkers that go along the parade route and provide that candy, and you keep those kids, you keep the spectators on the side. I've seen a number of parades do that. They'll have people walking along with a handful of candy, or many times it's a company that's providing a product, ice cream sandwich or whatever it may be, and they're walking along handing those out. That's a great way that we can still provide the experience, but reduce our risk. Okay, just on parades, let's set some standards on who can be in there. Our vehicles should either be vehicles that are registered, legal vehicles that can be driven on the roads, or they should be something that could legally go on over the road. Sometimes we'll have tractors or things like that. Are they legal? They're in safe condition, and as we have people sign up for that, that needs to be an obligation that they take on themselves. But if we see something that's hazardous, let's I knew this was a risky thing. What about animals in parades? You know what? It kind of goes the same way. Along with vehicles, we require those people to have safe vehicles. Same thing goes with animals, and let's make that a part of their agreement to participate in the parade, that they will have safe vehicles. Their animals are tame. But let's have a plan in place. What if the Shriner's car backfires and it scares the horse and it runs off? How do we handle that? Okay. Yeah, it looks like several of you are doing that as far as candy, to have those walkers do that. Okay. I've got to keep moving along. So running the event, we need to designate who is responsible. We should be using the instant command system. That's what our fire department, that's what our law enforcement agencies use when we have an incident. Well, this is just a fun event. Where we use an instant command, everybody needs to know that system, and that's the most efficient, easiest way that we can expand and contract for the type of event that we're dealing with. So use that as the main structure to organize your event. Then if something goes wrong, you already have that structure in place. With the Olympics, we used the Instant Command System. We used some other name that was probably copyrighted, and if I said it, I'd have to pay the IOC money. But it was basically the Instant Command System, same structure. We just used a little bit different terminology. Let's organize that. Let's have a communications plan. What happens if something goes wrong? How do we communicate if things are all right as well? We need to prepare for the worst and hope that it never happens, but ask ourselves the question. All right. The high school has homecoming parades, etc., and they allow the kids to throw candy from the floats. Are we liable as the city if it's on city streets? That's a good question, and I'll punt just a little bit, saying it's probably a legal question to say, are we really liable? But from a risk management standpoint, I'm going to look at that and say, go back to that first question. Whose event is it? Do they own that? They're doing it on our streets. Well, we should have some sort of documentation, a contract between the high school and our organization that says, you know, for you being able to use this, you have to, one, provide proof of coverage, and two, list the city as an additional insured as you're doing that. We're providing law enforcement in that, but you own the liability from that. Have them take on that risk. I hope that answered that question. Accountability. We want to designate somebody as an event safety officer. Folks, I just went into overtime. I just noticed that. I apologize. I can see everybody's still here. We only lost one or two. So if you don't mind, I'm going to keep going and hit the rest of this stuff. I apologize for going long, but I knew there would be a lot of questions on this, and there's a lot of stuff. So let's keep plugging along. Accountability. Let's designate everybody's responsible for safety at our events. All of our employees, all our volunteers, but we want to designate somebody as an event safety officer. Use whatever title you want, but somebody that is responsible for the overall safety of the event. So we have established that accountability. We want to establish some program to do inspections, so we're out looking at what's happening. With the Olympics, we had hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of volunteers, thousands of athletes and coaches and participants in the games. How did we? And we had a very successful games. We brought in an entire claims team from our insurance provider, and they had I can't remember what the exact number was, over a dozen claims people to take in all of the insurance claims that we were going to have from the Salt Lake Olympics. Well, after about 3 days, we told the majority of those claims people, go out and see an event, go and have some fun, because it worked so well. We had a great plan, and we were actively involved on a day-to-day basis. We had people looking for risks to our organization. We need to do that. Let's see. I'm going to answer those questions in just a minute. All right. Oh, let me go. I don't know if I caught all that. Let's see. What do we do if we identify a problem in these inspections? What's the process? Do we have people, staff, equipment, all of those things to fix that? If there's a problem with a piece of equipment, do we have a way to take it out of service to keep people off of it and to keep them from getting injured? And let's talk about what happens if something bad happens. We'll run through these things. So inspect. Regular inspections. We have both front of house and back of house. If it's back of house, we should be able to secure that so people can't get into places that are back of house, where we're putting on the event, but the general public are not supposed to go. And we should be looking both for patron, people that are visiting, as well as employee and volunteer safety. All right, these inspections don't happen from the truck. Drive-throughs don't work that way. We need to get out and walk those facilities and see what's happening. Look for those slips and falls. Checklists are good, and there's a lot of resources out there on checklists. We have plenty of those to provide. Documentation is key. If we want to avoid liability, if something bad happens, that we've done everything right, we've got to be able to prove that we've done everything right. So if it isn't written down, it never happened unless it's bad. They can always recreate those bad things. All right, so what do we document? We document both the good things and the bad things. We're trying to show that we're being reasonable and prudent. So if something bad is identified, we were out on an inspection and we find a trip hazard. Let's document that. When we fix it, let's document that. We want to show that we have done the reasonable and prudent thing. Let's document training, incidents. If incidents happen, we'll talk about that more in a second. Response to complaints, actions taken. Sometimes we want to use the police, particularly if they're part of our organization. If we've got the PD or the Sheriff's Department as part of our organization, let's use them to, if we've got a problem with people. The reason I like to use police is then we have a legal record, we have some documentation that shows that we're doing the right thing. Hey, we had a problem with somebody going outside of the bounds of what they should do. We brought the police in and they took care of business. There's a legal record that will help us prove our case. All right. We document these inspections, repairs, preventative maintenance, all these things that we do. How about liability waivers? Are they a good idea? Will they do anything for us? Check out this picture. That's my little girl. She was the champion mutton buster. She's 12 now, and she talks back a lot more than she did when she was that age. But I have 2 champion mutton busters. We do some interesting things that can expose us to some liability. How do we transfer that risk to the parents, me, when we are providing these type of activities? Do these liability waivers carry any weight in the court? The answer is yes and no. In general, the answer is no. Particularly if a minor is involved. A parent can't sign away a minor's, their child, or somebody they're a guardian for. They can't sign away their rights, and so legally they probably don't provide a ton of protection. They may be something that could help us out in court. The biggest help they are for us is in transferring risk. We hand this sheet to a parent before they put their kids on a wild sheep and allow them to go out and ride, and that parent reads what it says there. This may cause serious injury up to and including death. And I sign on that list. I'm okay with my kid dying because I want to be able to look at that picture and say, wow, she's a champion. Now, whatever. I have taken that risk on myself by signing that paper. Whether that sticks legally or just in my head, you know what? I signed that. I realized what I was getting into. Sometimes that is a good protection. So do we do it? Yeah. All right, let's hit a couple of things real quick, and I'm just going to try to wrap. So specifics on security, communication, and a response plan. So security, a lot of times we get this with small areas. Hey, we're a quiet town. Nothing bad ever happens here. We need to plan for bad things happening and hope that they don't. So we need to have a security plan. How do we control unruly people? How do we keep people where they're supposed to be? All of that needs to be part of it, and we need to own that as part of our preparations. We need to control access. Like I said, if there's a problem with something, how do we take it out of service? How do we keep people away? How do we turn people away if we cancel the event? Let's have a plan for that. How do we control their access? How do we communicate? So a signage plan, a way to communicate with our patrons and let them know what's going on. Social media can be a big help in this, but it won't cover everything. All right. Response plan. I want to have what could happen? We need to ask ourselves questions. What could happen? What could go wrong? And what do we do if it does? So here's an example. This is my family last summer at the county fair, county rodeo, and we had a thunderstorm come in. What did the rodeo do? The county do? Well, guess what? I'd been in the risk committee meeting a few months before, and we talked about putting a lightning hold policy in place, and they did an awesome job. So they had a lightning alert system. Came up, said there was lightning. They stopped the rodeo. They informed the crowd that it was potentially hazardous, and that the best plan for people would be to go to their cars or seek shelter elsewhere than sitting on the aluminum grandstands. Did we get up and move? I'll hang my head. No, because I didn't want my seat to get wet. I took that risk on myself, but it was an informed risk that I'd taken on myself, and the organization, the county, had done an excellent job in doing that. So lightning hold policy is a great example. What else could go wrong, and what contingencies do we have in place? Don't recreate the wheel. These things are out there. Let's look at other organizations that do the same thing. They've probably got a plan there. Lightning hold policy, the High School Activities Association has a policy in place. There are lightning warning systems in place that can help us on that. These are just examples, but it could be a variety of different issues that we can face. What do we do if there's an accident? Have a plan and train people on it before it happens, so we know what's happening. If we have, say, a disaster happens at our organization, a thunderstorm comes in and a lightning strike hits and people are injured, or a windstorm blows tents over and people are injured. We see these happen on a fairly regular basis. Who can speak to the press? Have we designated a public information officer, and are they capable of providing that information? Does everybody else on the team know that only that PIO can speak with the press? Okay. We want to collect information. It's best to have a form so we know what type of information to collect. But general information, who was involved, contact information, what happened. Take some pictures. That helps us in our in our claims process. Sometimes it may just prove that we were negligent. Well, that's why we have insurance, is when we're wrong, when we owe something, we pay that claim, and that can help us expedite paying that claim out. But if we're right and we've done everything right, your documentation can help us defend that claim. Make repairs. Don't admit fault. Train our people. Hey, this is a bad thing that happened, but don't go out and say, oh, it's all our fault. Hey, we've got full coverage insurance. It'll all be taken care of. That puts us at a disadvantage, particularly if we've done everything right, but we admit fault. If we identify a problem, do we make repairs? Yes. Fix the problems that we've identified. Okay. When we start a claim, if we feel that there's potential litigation, we feel that we are liable for something, then we want to start a claim, and really the sooner the better. So then we can go about getting our adjusters involved, identifying the information that we need, contacts, and the sooner we can take action, the better. Okay. See a question here. I can answer this one quickly. Can I get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Yes. Yes, we will. We can make that available to you. This webinar is being recorded as well, so you can go back and review that. Volunteers, or do volunteers make us liable? Sorry for going long, guys. I knew it was going to be a big one. Can volunteers make us liable? Yes. We have liability from a general liability standpoint. If they do something really dumb that can reflect on our organization, that side. How about workers' compensation? Yes, in the eyes of the law, a volunteer, an approved volunteer, can receive workers' compensation coverage. It may just be medical coverage, but if they are involved in law enforcement, search and rescue, fire, EMS, then they can also get the indemnity or lost time coverage as well. So, a couple things just quickly. If they're working with a sensitive population, say children, maybe seniors or folks that have diminished mental capacities, we should be always doing a background check, a criminal background check on this person. There are various resources to do that. Use a professional resource to do that. Really stay away from going in and using the BCI database. If you've got a PD there, that can be problematic. Train your volunteers, supervise them, and cover them, back them up, help them out. They do need to be approved, so you need to have a list of volunteers that are approved by your chief executive officer or her or his designee. Okay, keep that list and have it approved. What about service projects, Eagle projects, those type of things? Same deal. Protect your interests, ask questions, make sure that they have adequate coverage. If they're coming onto our facilities, it doesn't matter if it's the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever, this great organization, if they're going to come onto our facilities and start using power tools or heavy equipment, make sure that they've got coverage to protect us and get that certificate from them. Sometimes all bets are off, and an event will happen beyond our control. Wasatch County, was that last year, 2 years ago? Time all blends together. Had an event occur in their county that was giant but totally disorganized. It was the Rainbow Family Gathering, and it might happen in your county in future years. This is a loosely organized group. They do that intentionally, so nobody can be held accountable. They'll just show up in your area. It might be a flash mob. It might be, who knows what it may be. Let's have a plan for those things so we can take action. Don't recreate the wheel. If the Rainbow Family decides to show up in your county, realize that they've done this for decades, and there are a lot of other counties out there that have had experience with this, and you can learn from them. And you know, the great thing about being in government is we're not in competition. We can steal and plagiarize other government documents, of course, with their permission, but you know, we can go in and share that information back and forth without worrying about how that's perceived. Okay, a lot of stuff. Yeah, definitely network among ourselves. Absolutely. Plan for success. Think about these things, identify our risks, identify our hazards ahead of time, and put a plan together. We can do all of these things and pull off some great events. All right. Wow, I went way long, Brad. He's sitting there grinning. I've got to go back and look at some of these questions. What is acceptable coverage for motocross? Once again, I'm going to punt on that one. I would lean towards the $5 million or $10 million coverage on those, just because of the nature of that. But let me talk to our coverage guys and just verify what their recommendations are. Copy of the PowerPoint. If you want a copy of it, it's going to be fairly big. Send me an email. I'll send out the information as far as we've talked about. But if you want the slides, send me an email on that, and I'll send it out. This recording will be on our website hopefully later today. Cyclocross. Brent, do you know what a cyclocross event is? Is that like a bicycle? Oh, Brent, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you anyway. Still can't hear you. I can see your lips moving. Anyway, if you want to, Shayla, if you want to talk about what it's like, I'm not familiar with cyclocross. That's a bicycle type of motocross. This would be a better 2-hour workshop. I agree. I had a goal to get through it, and we went a little bit long. Let's see. All city employees. Our city has insisted all city employees become traffic control certified. If something were to go wrong in an intersection or placed in the city where the employee was placed, would the city cover that employee legally if that person was sued? If they're your employee and they're acting on your behest, then yeah, that's part of your coverage. That's a good best practice to have everybody traffic control certified. However, just along with that, we don't want people to jump out in front of traffic unprepared for that. So training, as well as having personal protective equipment. So the retroreflective vests, flashlights, you know, whatever if we've got a law enforcement officer out there doing traffic control, we should have those same resources available to those other employees. Would a homecoming parade come under special events planning? Yeah, I would absolutely include that as well. Okay, Brent, did we catch them all? Oh, I can't hear you. I don't know why. I can't get anything there from you. It's a biking event in a county bike park. Okay, yeah, absolutely. We can check on that and look at some look at coverage on that. Okay, folks. Sorry, long presentation. Hopefully you got some information out of it. I'm sure we have more questions. If it's a risk question, definitely talk to us, Brent, Doug, or myself. Let me click to this next. Here's our number here. It's email is just our first name, and so mine would be jason@utahtrust.gov, and then Doug and Brent just the same. Here's our main number here, 936-6400. Give us a call there. If you have coverage questions, we'll get you hooked up with your account executive on that. That's my cell number if you want to get right to me. And I think I'm done. I'm only 35 minutes over where I was supposed to end. That's pretty good. I don't see any more questions. Thanks so much, folks. Have a safe day, and let's talk and answer any questions, plan and prepare, and it'll all work out good. Thanks so much. Have a safe day. Here we go.